Personality is not random. It is the result of deeply rooted psychological patterns that have been studied and explored for over a century. One of the most profound contributions to this field came from Carl Jung, a Swiss psychiatrist, who introduced a revolutionary way of understanding human personality. According to Jung, our personalities are not simply collections of traits or habits, but are structured systems shaped by how our minds function on an unconscious and conscious level. Jung proposed that each person has innate psychological preferences that determine how they perceive the world and make decisions. These preferences are not learned behaviors, rather they are part of our psychological DNA. At the heart of Jung's theory are what he called the cognitive functions. These include 4 primary processes: thinking, feeling, sensing, and intuition. Each person naturally prefers one function over the others in each pair, either thinking or feeling when it comes to decision-making, and either sensing or intuition when it comes to perceiving the world. These functions are present in all of us, but the way they are prioritized and expressed varies from person to person. To illustrate this, imagine 2 people faced with the same situation, perhaps a moral dilemma or a complex work problem. One person might approach the problem analytically, weighing pros and cons, using logic and objectivity to reach a conclusion. This person is likely operating from a thinking preference. Another person might approach the same issue through the lens of how it affects others emotionally, or whether it aligns with their values. This is the hallmark of the feeling function. Neither approach is better or worse. They are simply different ways the human mind works. Jung also emphasized the role of energy direction, captured in the concepts of introversion and extraversion. These terms are often misunderstood in modern language. Introversion doesn't mean shyness, and extraversion doesn't simply mean being outgoing. Instead, they describe whether a person's energy flows inward or outward. Introverts are energized by internal reflection, solitude, and meaningful one-on-one interactions. Extroverts, on the other hand, gain energy from external stimulation, social interaction, and engaging with the outside world. Together, these preferences form the foundation of an individual's personality type. They are not fixed labels meant to box people in, but dynamic frameworks that help us understand ourselves and others better. When Jung's insights were later expanded into systems like the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, MBTI, it became possible to classify these psychological preferences into 16 distinct personality types. But even then, the intention was never to limit people. It was to empower them with language and understanding. Understanding that personality is structured and not random changes everything. It brings clarity to why we behave the way we do, why certain environments drain us while others energize us, why we connect deeply with some people and struggle with others. It reveals that our ways of thinking, feeling, and acting are not flaws. They're natural expressions of our inner architecture. This perspective also opens the door to growth. Once you recognize the structure of your personality, you can work with it, not against it. You can lean into your strengths and consciously develop your lesser-used functions. Jung didn't advocate for staying stuck in one type, but believed in a lifelong process of individuation, becoming a whole, balanced version of yourself. But that process begins with self-acknowledge, and personality psychology offers one of the most powerful starting points. So the next time you ask yourself why you are the way you are, remember, it's not random. It's structured, it's meaningful, and most importantly, it's something you can understand, embrace, and evolve. The foundation of Carl Jung's personality theory lies in the understanding of 4 core psychological functions: thinking, feeling, sensing, and intuition. These functions describe how we interact with the world, how we gather information, and how we make decisions. According to Jung, everyone uses all 4 functions to some extent, but each person naturally prefers one function from each of the 2 opposing pairs. These preferences become the cornerstone of our personality and play a significant role in shaping our behavior, mindset, communication style, and emotional responses. The first pair, thinking and feeling, refers to how we make judgments and decisions. People who favor thinking tend to base their decisions on logic, objectivity, and impersonal analysis. They look for consistency, principles, and fairness, and often ask questions like, "Does this make sense?" or "Is this the most efficient solution?" Thinkers are typically more detached when evaluating situations, especially emotionally charged ones. Their strength lies in clarity, structure, and problem-solving. However, their challenge may come in understanding emotional nuances or considering personal values during decision-making. On the other hand, individuals who prefer feeling make decisions based on personal values, empathy, and the impact on others. They are attuned to the emotional atmosphere of a situation and often prioritize harmony, compassion, and ethical alignment. A feeler might ask, how will this affect the people involved, or does this feel right? While feelers excel at nurturing relationships and promoting emotional well-being, they might sometimes struggle to remain objective or detach themselves when necessary. Importantly, feeling is not the opposite of intelligence. It's a different kind of intelligence, deeply rooted in human connection. The second pair, sensing and intuition, explains how people prefer to gather and process information. A sensing type is grounded in reality, preferring facts, details, and practical experiences. They trust what they can see, touch, and measure. Sensors are often focused on the present or the past, valuing structure, tradition, and established methods. Their strength lies in their attention to the here and now, making them great implementers, organizers, and realists. However, they may sometimes miss the bigger picture or struggle with abstract or future-oriented thinking. In contrast, individuals with a preference for intuition are future-oriented, abstract thinkers. They are drawn to possibilities, ideas, symbolism, and patterns. Intuitives often look beneath the surface, asking questions like, "What does this mean?" or "Where could this lead?" They tend to think metaphorically and are energized by innovation, vision, and exploration. While intuitives are typically imaginative and strategic, they may overlook practical details or struggle with routines and day-to-day maintenance tasks. Each function plays a vital role in how we navigate life. Imagine two people working on the same project. A sensing feeling type might focus on practical outcomes and how the solution affects the team emotionally, while an intuitive thinking type might look for innovative approaches that align with long-term goals, using logic to guide decisions. Neither approach is superior. They are simply different lenses through which people experience and interpret the world. Understanding these four functions gives us insight into our preferences, but more importantly, it helps us understand those around us. Conflicts often arise not because people are wrong, but because they perceive and process reality differently. A thinker may appear cold to a feeler, just as a feeler may seem overly emotional to a thinker. A sensor may think an intuitive is unrealistic, while the intuitive may see the sensor as too narrow-minded. But with awareness, these differences become sources of strength rather than division. Carl Jung believed that the path to personal development is not about favoring one function over another, but about learning to integrate them. While we may have natural preferences, developing our less dominant functions can lead to greater balance, adaptability, and wisdom. It allows us to approach life with more flexibility, empathy, and insight. So, the four psychological functions are not just categories. They are tools. Tools for growth, understanding, and deepening our relationships with ourselves and others. Recognizing how we think, feel, sense, and intuit brings us one step closer to the psychological wholeness Jung called individuation. In Carl Jung's theory of personality, the concepts of introversion and extroversion play a central role in understanding how individuals direct their energy and attention. These are not merely surface-level traits, like being shy or outgoing. They are much deeper orientations of the psyche that influence how a person processes experience, recharges emotionally, and connects with the world around them. When we understand introversion and extroversion from a psychological perspective rather than a social one, we begin to grasp why people differ so dramatically in their preferences, reactions, and energy levels. Extroversion, in Jung's model, refers to the tendency to focus one's energy outward, toward people, objects, and external events. Extroverts are naturally drawn to activity, interaction, and stimulation. They thrive in dynamic environments, enjoy talking through their thoughts, and often seek feedback from the outside world to shape their ideas and decisions. Because they are attuned to what's happening around them, extroverts are typically action-oriented and quick to engage. social gatherings, collaborative projects, and open discussions often energize them rather than drain them. However, the extrovert's challenge may lie in overexposure to external input, leading to a lack of internal reflection. Sometimes, in their eagerness to act or speak, they might not pause to fully consider their inner thoughts or unconscious motivations. This is not a flaw but a balance issue, one that becomes easier to manage once an extrovert becomes aware of their tendency to focus outward. Introversion, on the other hand, is the orientation toward the inner world of thoughts, feelings, and imagination. Introverts are more reflective by nature and tend to process experiences internally before expressing them externally. They draw energy from solitude, quiet contemplation, and deep one-on-one interactions. Rather than thinking out loud, introverts prefer to think things through privately before forming opinions or making decisions. They often crave meaningful conversations rather than small talk, and may need time alone to recharge after social engagements. Introverts are frequently misunderstood as antisocial or passive, but this is far from true. Their inner worlds are often rich and complex. They may not always speak first, but when they do, their words are thoughtful and deliberate. The challenge for introverts may be the external pressure to socialize, conform, or constantly perform in a world that often favors extraversion. Yet when allowed to operate in their natural rhythm, introverts can be deeply creative, insightful, and emotionally intelligent. What's important to understand is that no one is purely introverted or purely extroverted. Jung himself said that such a person would be in a mental institution. We all have both tendencies within us, but one is usually dominant. Recognizing whether you are introverted or extroverted helps you better manage your energy, create balanced environments, and build relationships that honor your natural rhythm. For example, in the workplace, an extrovert may enjoy brainstorming in groups, whereas an introvert might prefer to think about a solution on their own and contribute once they've fully processed it. In relationships, an extrovert may want frequent interaction, while an introvert may need space and quiet to reconnect with themselves. If neither type is aware of these differences, misunderstanding and frustration can arise. But with awareness, these differences become complementary strengths. Understanding the extroversion-introversion dimension also empowers personal growth. An extrovert might challenge themselves to engage in more introspection, while an introvert may stretch their comfort zone by initiating social connections. These efforts don't change a person's type, but they allow for greater balance and adaptability, a key theme in Jung's concept of psychological development. Recognizing where you naturally focus your energy isn't about limiting your identity, it's about discovering how to honor your nature, manage your energy wisely, and understand others more compassionately. When we stop expecting introverts to act like extroverts and vice versa, we open the door to deeper respect, collaboration, and personal fulfillment. Carl Jung's original ideas about psychological types were groundbreaking, but it was the development of the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, MBTI, that brought his theory into practical, everyday use for millions of people. MBTI expanded Jung's model and gave it a structured format, classifying personality into 16 distinct types, based on preferences in how people perceive the world and make decisions. It added one key dimension, judging versus perceiving, and organized Jung's 4 cognitive functions into recognizable, accessible personality types like INFP, ESTJ, and ENTP. But at its core, the MBTI is not about labeling or limiting individuals. It's about helping people understand themselves and others more clearly, with greater compassion and self-awareness. To recap, Jung's original psychological functions were grouped into 2 primary pairs: thinking versus ENTP. 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 Thinking versus feeling and sensing versus intuition, with the introversion versus extroversion distinction determining whether those functions are directed inward or outward. The MBTI built on this by introducing a fourth pair, judging versus perceiving. This fourth axis describes how a person prefers to structure their outer world, whether they seek order, closure, and predictability, judging, or prefer flexibility, spontaneity, and openness, perceiving. Those who lean toward judging tend to prefer structured environments, defined plans, and clear decisions. They like to organize their lives and often feel a sense of satisfaction from finishing tasks, reaching goals, and maintaining a sense of control. For a judging type, unpredictability can be uncomfortable, and they often thrive in environments with clear rules and expectations. It's not about being judgmental, it's about preferring decisiveness and order. On the other side, perceiving types are more comfortable with ambiguity and adaptability. They enjoy keeping their options open, responding to life as it comes, and exploring possibilities before settling on a choice. Perceivers are more likely to go with the flow and may resist rigid schedules or predefined paths. Their creativity, spontaneity, and openness to new experiences are often their greatest strengths, though they may struggle with deadlines or follow-through if their energy isn't focused. When the MBTI combines all four of these preference axes, introversion/extraversion, sensing/intuition, thinking/feeling, and judging/perceiving, we get the 16 personality types, each with its own cognitive stack or function order. The two preferred functions stack their preferred function order. For example, an INFJ has a dominant function of introverted intuition, NI, followed by extroverted feeling, SE, then introverted thinking, TI, and extroverted sensing, C. This function stack reflects not just their traits, but the deeper mental processes that shape their personality and how they relate to the world. It's important to understand that MBTI is not a test that puts people in boxes. Instead, it's a descriptive tool, a mirror that reflects patterns in how individuals think, feel, act, and respond to life. Knowing your type can provide clarity on why certain careers, relationships, or activities feel more aligned with who you are. It can explain why you clash with certain people or thrive in certain environments, and it can offer guidance on how to grow by developing the less dominant parts of your personality. More importantly, understanding MBTI types helps us see others not as wrong or difficult, but simply different. A judging type might get frustrated with a perceiving partner's spontaneity, while the perceiver might feel stifled by the judge's structure. But with awareness, both can learn to appreciate each other's strengths. A thinking parent might not understand their feeling child's emotional depth, but understanding MBTI can bridge that gap with empathy. In Jungian terms, the MBTI can be seen as a map of the psyche's preferences. It's not fixed. People grow, evolve, and mature over time, but knowing where you begin, your natural psychological preferences, gives you a powerful starting point for personal development, better communication, and deeper relationships. MBTI isn't a limitation, it's an invitation to explore who you are and who you have the potential to become. Understanding personality types doesn't just give us a new vocabulary, it transforms the way we live, work, and relate to others. When we begin to see ourselves and those around us through the lens of psychological preferences, rather than assumptions or stereotypes, a powerful shift happens. We move from judgment to understanding, from conflict to connection, and from confusion to clarity. That's the real value of understanding personality. It doesn't just explain behavior, it enhances the quality of our human experience. One of the most immediate benefits is self-awareness. Many of us go through life trying to conform to external expectations, trying to be more outgoing, more analytical, more agreeable, or more decisive, depending on the situation. But when we understand our personality type, especially through models like Jung's cognitive functions or the Myers-Briggs system, we begin to realize that our preferences are not flaws, they are natural expressions of how our minds work. For instance, someone with a feeling preference may have spent years believing they are too emotional in a world that rewards detached decision-making, or a perceiving type may have internalized shame about their struggle with deadlines in a system that praises structure and planning. Understanding personality reframes these experiences. It doesn't excuse weakness, but it explains preference and potential. With this new lens, self-compassion naturally follows. you stop trying to fix things that were never broken, and instead focus on working with your natural wiring instead of against it. You begin to build habits, set goals, and choose environments that align with how you function best. A highly intuitive introvert, for example, may realize they do their most creative thinking in solitude and may begin protecting quiet time in their schedule. A practical, sensing extrovert might thrive in fast-paced, hands-on environments where teamwork and task completion are key. Self-acknowledge is empowering because it leads to better choices, not just in career or lifestyle, but also in how we regulate stress, recharge, and grow. But the impact of personality understanding doesn't stop with the self. It becomes transformative in relationships. Think of how many misunderstandings occur simply because we assume others see the world as we do. A thinking type may become frustrated with someone who seems overly emotional, interpreting their sensitivity as weakness, and then they may feel they must turn their sensitivity as weakness. A judging type may misread a perceiving type's spontaneity as irresponsibility. These assumptions create friction, but with personality awareness, the friction becomes a point of learning rather than a wall. We start to ask not, why are they like this, but rather, what function or preference might they be leading with? This shift creates space for empathy, flexibility, and more effective communication. In work environments, personality insight improves team dynamics, leadership, and collaboration. A team with diverse personality types can often cover more ground and solve problems more effectively than one where everyone thinks the same. However, diversity without understanding can lead to tension. When people understand that an extroverted teammate needs to talk ideas out loud, while an introverted colleague needs time to reflect before responding, they can build systems that respect both approaches. Leaders who understand personality types can assign tasks and give feedback in ways that align with each person's strengths, motivating rather than frustrating their teams. Even in conflict resolution, personality type becomes a powerful tool. Often, disagreements stem not from values or intentions, but from differing ways of processing the world. Recognizing that someone's decision-making is rooted in logic rather than emotion, or vice versa, can diffuse tension and pave the way for compromise. Understanding personality types creates a language of respect. It teaches us that difference is not dysfunction, and that every type has something valuable to offer. When we stop trying to mold ourselves or others into fixed ideals, and instead learn to appreciate the beautiful complexity of personality, we create space for growth, authenticity, and deeper human connection. That is the real gift of understanding personality. It doesn't change who we are, it helps us become who we were meant to be. Understanding your personality type is more than an intellectual exercise. It is a gateway to transformation. Carl Jung's model of psychological types and the frameworks that followed, such as the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, MBTI, offer profound insight into how we perceive, decide, interact, and grow. But knowing your type is only the beginning. The real power lies in what you do with that knowledge. Myers-Briggs. Jung believed in a lifelong journey of psychological growth, which he called individuation. The process of integrating all aspects of the self, including the conscious and unconscious, into a balanced and whole personality. This journey starts with awareness and deepens through intentional development. In other words, growth begins when you know your type, but it doesn't end there. Every personality type has both strengths and blind spots. For example, someone with a preference for thinking may be naturally objective and excellent at analyzing complex problems. But that same person may struggle to tune into emotional nuances, or may unintentionally come across as insensitive. A person with a dominant feeling preference may have deep empathy and emotional intelligence, but may avoid difficult decisions to preserve harmony, even when directness is necessary. These blind spots are not flaws, they are opportunities for growth. When you understand your type, you begin to notice your default settings, the patterns that govern how you approach decisions, communication, conflict, relationships, and even self-talk. You begin to see which areas come effortlessly and which ones feel unnatural or difficult. Instead of seeing these difficulties as signs of failure, you can now view them as natural opposites of your strengths, and therefore as essential areas for development. For example, if you're an introverted intuitive type, You might be future-focused, visionary, and deeply introspective, but you may struggle with staying grounded in day-to-day details or following through on practical tasks. When you know this about yourself, you can create systems and routines that support your growth. You might intentionally practice mindfulness, build structure into your goals, or seek partnerships with people who excel at execution. This isn't about fixing yourself, it's about completing yourself. Jung emphasized that every individual must confront and integrate their inferior functions, the less developed parts of the psyche that often remain unconscious. For example, someone who leads with intuition may have sensing as their inferior function. While they naturally focus on ideas, possibilities, and the abstract, they may struggle with being present in the moment or noticing sensory details. Growth requires turning toward that less developed function and giving it attention. It's not easy. It often feels uncomfortable, unfamiliar, or even threatening to the ego. But it is essential for wholeness. This principle also applies to relationships. Once you know your type, you can begin to develop more balanced interactions. You may realize that your partner, friend, or colleague communicates, decides, or organizes their life differently, not because they're difficult, but because they have a different set of preferences. You can practice stepping into their perspective, developing your less dominant functions in the process. A thinking type might learn to listen without solving. A judging type might learn to sit with uncertainty. These shifts lead to deeper relationships and a broader sense of empathy. Growth through personality awareness is not about changing who you are, it's about becoming more of who you truly are, in a balanced and integrated way. The more you explore your type, the more you'll discover about your true potential. As you strengthen your natural strengths and confront your weaker areas, you become more flexible, more conscious, and more complete. This is the heart of Jung's idea of individuation, the process of becoming your whole self. It starts with recognizing your type, but it continues as you challenge yourself to develop the parts you've ignored, repressed, or overlooked. Through that process, you not only become a better version of yourself, but also a more understanding, compassionate, and wise presence in the lives of others. Personality knowledge doesn't limit you, it frees you. It gives you a roadmap for inner transformation, one step at a time.